Hello, Scott Hebner here. Welcome back to the Next Frontiers of AI podcast, where we partner with industry experts and pioneers to explore the latest developments shaping the future of AI and how to prepare now rather than later. With innovation cycles and the pursuit of higher ROI moving at warp speed, staying up to date is more important than ever. Our view here at theCUBE Research is that 2025 will mark the rise of agentic AI, where we'll evolve from automating tasks powered by Gen AI and LLMs to goal-driven decision-making powered by an array of new advanced technologies that build upon LLMs. But there's always a big challenge out there. Business leaders already lack trust in AI outcomes, which is slowing down deployments in around 60% of enterprises. And with AI agents promising to help make business critical decisions and act more autonomously, the issue of trust will become even more pronounced. I mean, are businesses and users really going to just blindly trust AI agents? I seriously doubt it. I think trust will become the currency of innovation in 2025. The more AI is trusted, the more businesses will be willing to buy into the innovation roadmap promised by agentic AI. And the keys to achieving greater trust in AI will be a function of, I think, three things. One, can it transparently explain itself in the language of the user? Two, can it help users understand why one decision is better than others? And then three, can users interrogate the recommendations to test alternate scenarios? In this episode, we'll explore how one innovative company, Scanbuy, has achieved 10 times ROI by addressing the trust issue head on with the help of Causal AI. To tell you how, I'm thrilled to be joined by Marc Le Maitre, who is the Chief Technical Officer at Scanbuy, which is a global leader in mobile marketing and advertising technology. Welcome, Marc, and again, thanks so much for taking your time to be here.
Pleasure to be here.
So where are you right now these days? You still in London?
Yes, I am. Yeah. So rain's coming in horizontally and the beer is warm.
Is there, the beer is warm. Is there any sun in the last week?
No. Thinking there's a rumor it came out for about 5 minutes. No, it's this season is fairly grey, but a lovely place, and I wouldn't be anywhere else.
Yeah, my son goes to Oxford over there, and he says he goes weeks without actually seeing the sun. So, anyhow, Marc, just tell us a little bit about Scanbuy and your personal journey to where you are now and what Scanbuy is up to.
Well, started off in mobile communications about the time that the cellular phone was being born, and so I've come on in from first generation, second generation, third, fourth in cellular technologies. And what was more interesting than the networks was the value-added services that we were building. So I did a lot of the pioneering work on browsers in mobile phones and the app stores, location-based services, stuff that we take for granted today. But that was where I came from, and I got involved in what I think were called the identity wars back in the late 90s and early 2000s, where federated identity was born, and the fight that went on then to become a user's identity provider, and got really interested in data privacy, and that just hasn't gone away.
Yeah, and you obviously are in the middle of all the AI stuff now. I mean, how do you see AI transforming the world that you live in right now, which is advertising tech?
Well, I don't think we're any different from any other industry. I think the impending storm of AI hits everywhere. I mean, there's some very specific things that the advertising technology industry suffers from. One is signal loss, and AI is going to solve that. It's going to solve creative, allow infinitely hyper precision targeted marketing. in fact, a whole lot of what and not a lot of why and how, coming out of what I see at the moment. But again, I don't think our industry is any different from any other in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's a step forward on the journey, right? Probably going to roll out over a decade or longer as we get more and more sophisticated here with, we got the generative AI and the LLM foundation, which has certainly given everyone a great head start here. But as we've discussed in the past conversations, there are quite a few, issues, if you will, or challenges with an LLM and their correlative designs. And I know you've been spending a lot of time over the last many years trying to figure out how to mitigate these real world issues, with the LLMs and predictive
Mhm.
models for that matter. So what were some of the key issues that you were facing at Scanbuy when doing the programmatic advertising?
Well, we didn't have the distraction of large language models when I started. So about 2018, I think it was, that OpenAI put out their paper about GPTs. Back then, we were using much less sophisticated algorithms to do predictive analysis on, if we knew the apps that were on your mobile device, could we predict certain traits in your personality or demographic or gender? And LLMs weren't even a blip on the radar at that point. So we hired a really clever data scientist out of college, and we spent many months attempting to understand what went inside some of these black box machines, only to realize that we were never going to get there. And what that did, it spurred me on to want to be able to try and explain the internal workings of the machine. So that's how I got my first.
Yeah, and that's kind of leads us to my intro, right? About I know if there was one word that describes you in the world of AI, it's all about trust, right? And as part of that, in your pursuit of trust and transparency and explainability, that sort of led you to become a huge advocate of causal AI, which, as you know, that's how we met in the first place. Because I'm also a big fan of causal AI, and think it's going to become a big deal as time goes by here. But how did you stumble across causal AI?
It found us, to be honest with you. We'd used many words to describe what we were trying to do. You'd use the word explainable, only to realize that somebody else had already fully defined that term or adequately defined it. And explaining it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to understand it. So we then looked at understandable AI, traceable AI, and honestly, it was every term: trustworthy AI, ethical AI, all had preconceived notions about it. And what I realized was we were doing something that really didn't have any real parallel. And so actually, if you look at trends.google.com and put in there the keywords causal AI and had a look at the number of times that that's been searched, you'll find it's a term that really didn't come into the search term world until 2022.
Yeah.
So we'd been looking for some space that we could define what we were doing without tripping over everybody else, and this one found us.
Yeah, and I assume your pursuit of understandable AI, your first step that you mentioned, that's how you ended up hooking up with How So, right?
Indeed, and their dictionary to describe this as morphed as ours has done, and we've been on the same journey. So yeah, it's to see causal AI come out, and then to find out that it's rooted in deep-seated in philosophy. It's not a new concept, but it's an unbesmirched term at the moment, I believe, for what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, because my understanding of How So is, you started off with synthetic kind of data and optimizing large language models, closer to the data, if you will, for performance and all that kind of stuff. And then from there, they got into the AI reasoning around, causal AI and semantic reasoning. And now they're into the world of agents. And yeah, they're definitely kind of moving along the journey here. But I tell you what, why don't we, um, one thing we should definitely do here is probably step back in a second and talk a little bit about causal AI for our audience. But before we transition to that, to kind of set that up, when we talked last time, and in the research note that I wrote about this particular use case, you had like a great quote, and just to try to paraphrase it, it was something like, we're using LLMs and Gen AI to explain outcomes based on causal models. So you're actually using LLMs as the gateway, but it's based on causal models at a very atomic level, and you're able to achieve almost no hallucination or bias in it, and that you were going to fly your flag on causal AI going forward in the world of ad tech. That was
Yeah,
a great
I
quote.
mean, yes, I think I know where we're going with that one. We coming back down to this business of finding a term that we finally understood, was describe what it is that we were trying to do. We realized that we can't do this in isolation. We created this thing called a competence manifold, a manifold in the sense of a statistical plane.
Mhm.
And on it, we mapped all the disciplines required to understand the output of a causal model. So what did the audience need to understand? What disciplines, what statistical and mathematical chops they needed to have, and realized fairly quickly that if you do that by competence level, using a large language model trained specifically in your domain of experience, which is, it's not a chat GPT, it is a domain specific large language model trained on a corpus of data, specific to, for instance, if you want to test this, you just go and ask GPT to explain calculus to a 3-year-old, and it'll talk about a ball rolling down a hill, and you go, yeah, you can take a complex subject and make it less complex for people who don't have that frame of reference in order to be able to understand it. And the analogy we use is, the check engine warning light on a vehicle. Everybody
Mhm.
knows what it means, but to actually go in there, you do need a greater degree of skill, and you can either do it yourself at home, or you can put it into a garage, or you can take it to the dealership, and each one gets, being able to get deeper into it, but it still turns the engine warning light on when it misbehaves. So that's the sort of way in which we felt that hybrid. We use hybrid RAG, so we're using a known corpus of information. The bit that we don't have is then we use the large language models where we can't explain the embeddings. But if we look at the embeddings, especially in the spaces we're looking at, I mean, if you were looking at the role of race in recidivism, you might say that the data set is biased. But we think that when you're looking at things like fundamentals of calculus, they're pretty clear cut and dried. So your large language model is about as hallucination free as it can be. A
Right.
lot of peer reviewed information in it.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah, no, it does, and because the more vague the question, or you're asking for a goal, is very different than something it has memorized from going through, uncountable amounts of data, sucking up the whole internet essentially, right? And I think what you're getting to with the causal AI is it allows you to understand cause and effect, which the entire, human species operates on, right? Um,
Goodness, yes.
and yeah, well, let's do step back here for a second and just kind of talk a little bit about causal AI at a high level here, and then we'll come back and dive into the use cases. And
Mhm.
a mere mortal, if you will, take on it, from me at least, is I like to think of a couple quotes that really kind of help capture the essence of all this. So one is Aristotle. Um, and we'll bring up the quote here. Um, if you prove the cause, you at once prove the effect. And conversely, nothing can exist without its cause. So it's obviously philosophy, right? But if you kind of understand how the brain operates and how we think, at the foundation of everything humans do, for the most part, just about everything we do, there's this notion of cause and effect, because we're evaluating, if I do this, what's going to happen? If I don't do this, if I don't go to sleep, what happens if I hit the snooze again? Like, you're almost constantly processing cause and effect. And certainly a business is doing that, right? Because every effect that a business creates on its employees, its partners, its customers, right? Every action it takes, every investment it makes, everything it does, um, it's going to cause an effect. And sometimes when things don't go right, if you don't understand root cause, then you're going to have a hard time making decisions to improve it. So I think this kind of captures the essence of what we're talking about here, which today's LLMs and generative AI cannot do, because they're just correlating statistical data, correct?
That's my understanding. In fact, I was going to fire straight back at you a reference that a quote that ties this thing into a nice, neat little bow. Gottfried Leibniz, granddaddy of calculus, said nothing exists without a reason. And I think that says it all. I mean, I know we're going to get onto Judea Pearl and, the do calculus arithmetic. And, this is what gets me about it is Aristotle didn't take a single computer science class, but he nailed it.
Yeah, no, he did.
And so therefore it's bigger than what we're talking about here. As you say, it's a human trait. I mean, this cause and effect and trying to understand it. And I think if I have a utopian view of the world, it's that we figure out quick enough that it's a meeting of the two, not one over the other, humanity and the machine. So I mean, and it's been around for hundreds, thousands
Yeah, I
of
mean,
years.
if the goal is for AI to increasingly mimic how humans think so that they can help humans do things better, humans are causal by nature, so AI will have to become causal by nature. And I think, not only is that necessary advancement over the years to come, perhaps starting this year in earnest, but it's inevitable. It's just a matter of time before this gets infused into, AI. Otherwise, it's going to come, we're going to be putting the brakes on what's possible here. And you brought up Judith Pearl, the book of Why, which is a great book for all of you if you haven't read it. But there's a great quote in there, and we'll also bring that up here, which is, and just think carefully about this, right? While probabilities encode our beliefs about a static world, right, and LLMs work on statistical probabilities and correlation, so they're encoding the static world learned from the past, right, the data sets. Causality, when infused into these LLMs, into AI, will tell us how and why those probabilities will actually change when the world around us changes. So when the conditions change or actions change or this change, right? And what I love about that quote is it kind of says that statistical probabilities are good, right? LLMs are good only if you expect your future to be just like your past. And there are certainly some use cases where you want the exact replica of what works, like some kind of workflow or something like that. But as a general rule in business, it's always changing. The conditions are changing, the weather's changing, your employees are changing, everything's changing. So you want AI to be able to adapt to those changes. And without causality, you're going to have one hell of a time having AI help you do that. Right? It's the reality of
You
business.
can't back out. You cannot back out. I'll counter your quote because I agree with you that is apocryphal. With a little known one from a paper I found on Archive, right, called Model Dementia. Generated data makes models forget. Right now, dementia is a subject dear to my heart. My father passed away after a 10-year struggle 4 years ago with that disease. So, and the model of what he went through is burned into my memory. And when I read this paper, it was actually renamed later on. They took the word dementia out of it in deference to not upsetting people, and it doesn't upset me because I'll read you a quote from it. It's a little long, and I wish I had it up on screen, but it says, over time, we start losing information about the true distribution. This is, sorry, I should preface this by saying they're talking about training models on the output of models, the recursive process. Okay.
Yep.
Over time, we start losing information about the true distribution, which first starts with tails disappearing, and over the generations, learned behaviors start converging to a point estimate with very small variance. And it goes on to say, furthermore, we show that this process is inevitable even for cases with almost ideal conditions for long-term learning. And what I realized when I read that is that that was my father's condition. They
Mm.
correctly identified dementia and then placed it into, I'll tell you why this is so important today is we just learned DeepSeek is being sued by OpenAI for training the DeepSeek model on the OpenAI model. And I'll tell you now, with what 10% estimates today of the web content is synthetic. Guys and girls, this is BSE, mad cow disease all over again, where it took 4 to 6 years. There was no reversal, no cure, and the only thing to do was to tear it all down and start all over again. And that is what's going to happen to models if we don't have causality in there so that you can back out and teach the model to forget, not what it remembers, but what it truly forgets.
Right.
And
And
it's like,
adapt with
and that's like,
and adapt to
yes.
changes. Yeah.
And if you don't, it's just like taking with a black box model, it's like taking a cake and trying to unbake the sugar from it. Just,
Yeah. You,
it's just not
you
going to
got the
happen.
analogies. Yeah. It's actually
I
when I
got,
read about the brain and how the brain operates, the limbic part of the brain is where you process memory and you establish memories, and then you act on instinct from memories. Like I notice my dogs tend to do that. If I'm taking a shower, they get all upset 'cause it's likely I'm going to leave, right? And that's what these LLMs are doing is they're just accumulating, patterns and anomalies and things of that nature, and they're correlative, right? And it's only going to get you so far. I think it's a necessary foundation, but so when I think of the North Star of where causal AI is, you start to infuse this in and build upon LLMs and generative AI and predictive models. It's truly has the potential here to revolutionize decision making in business, because it can help humans, to your point, Mark, understand the precise chain of events leading to a desired outcome, and then be able to deal with changing conditions as you head down that path, right? Whether you're intervening with it
yeah.
or interrogating it, or things just change, and you're basically moving from predictions to interventions, and from tasks to achieving more nebulous goals, because it's helping you reason,
I
right?
mean, what you've done is just used, you've just defined critical thinking without using those words, which I think is one of it's the unsung component of what we bring to the machine is that critical thinking. Without it, you get a whole bunch of what, no, why.
Right. It tells you, it can tell you what, but it really struggles on the how and why. You're right. And,
Yeah.
again, necessary foundation, but the more you can infuse the causal AI techniques and capabilities into it, it's not going to solve world peace. It's not going to magically become a human thinker. But if the goal is to increasingly mimic it, to make humans, give them superpowers and to be more productive, I think it has enormous potential, and it's being democratized for the masses as we speak through platforms and tools like How So, right? And actually, we'll bring up a chart here. Get your thoughts on this. This is my way of just netting it out. You know, the mere mortal version of, so what is causal AI? Well, it can understand, as I said, the precise chain of events leading to an outcome. But more specifically, four key things here. One is it knows why things occur, why things happen, right? It can
Hmm.
understand the consequences of various actions. So it can actually rank influences on what may happen if you take a certain action versus other actions, and help you essentially problem solve. because it knows the how and the why. It can also, explain things in the language of the user and do a much better job of that. So it's much more transparent because you understand those precise chains of events that it's recommending.
Mhm.
And then it's going to help you problem solve in the sense of counterfactual reasoning and what if I do this instead? It's telling me to do this, but I think I should do this. You can start to model low
Mhm.
risk modeling of what may happen. You can do causal discovery to understand how things actually work, not how you think they work. It's going to help you understand root cause, right? And this whole idea of being able to intervene with the model, interrogate it, and do what if scenarios. I think, again, that's what decision making is all about, is it not? So this is my 2 cent version of, what do you think?
I just I I'd say I'm going to apply it back to an analogy I used earlier about the check engine warning light. Every single one of those points up there, understanding the consequences of leaving the engine warning light on, sir, is going to result, or madam, is going to result in you blowing the engine. I mean, and the consequences if it won't get through inspection the next time. Now, you may not have the chops to drill down and find out exactly why, but when you do, the reasons, the cause and effect is made manifest. And I really do believe we've got the frameworks out there. We just need to apply them to our use of AI. And I believe again, the vehicle analogy, that the true power is in the hybrid, where you've got a causal model that's being explained by a domain-specific large language model. I think that really does work well.
Yeah,
It's a bit
I
like
think it's
an endoskeleton.
yeah. I kind of think of it as you have the foundation is the LLMs and um, the generative AI, essentially the gateway into AI, right? But then you got to build an ecosystem of models around it that start to, you know, model a specific use case, and that's domain knowledge. It's this reasoning,
Yes.
right? And the ability to explain it and know why things happen and intervene with it. And that's when you start mixing in these causal models, and you do it incrementally over time, and it just becomes more and more, quote unquote, reasoning capable, um,
Yeah.
where it's not trying to predict the reasoning. It actually kind of understands the cause and effect, and it's not just doing it by pattern recognition. It's actually thinking about things, and
It's
which
again, it's the reversibility of it all as well. So when you put data in there that needs to get removed, if you don't have that cause and effect understanding, you just you it's rip it up and start again,
yeah,
or suffer the consequences of bias and drift continuously, which then feeds back on itself.
right. Well, it goes to the notion that what we're accustomed to, and most businesses are doing with Gen AI and things of that nature, is they're automating tasks, right? They're analyzing information, they're creating content, all really important stuff that's highly productive and a big step forward. But if you really want to get into the world of decision intelligence, and use AI to actually make better decisions and to problem solve, whether it's at an individual level or an organizational level, um, I just don't see how that's going to work too well without causal AI techniques infused into it. Which sort of brings us to let's get into Scanbuy here and what you've actually
Mhm.
done. And my understanding is that it started with a focus on creating trust in the programmatic modeling that you were doing for advertising, and which comes then from transparently understanding what the hell it's why it chose a certain collection of people to target, right?
Yeah, I work in an unregulated industry. Ed tech is predominantly unregulated, becoming more regulated now, but it's not like finance and healthcare. So there was a lot of the transparency initiatives are on individual companies' recognizance. There are a number of trade bodies. IAB Tech Lab is the one that we're a member of that does pull these standards together for transparency. What we'd noted was that they get to a certain point of um, self-declaration of transparency, which can then be audited by a third party, but that it was really focused on what would be considered deterministic data. As soon as you got into the modeling realm, there was no natural transparency mechanisms in the modeling world to be able to say, oh, in order to get around signal loss, we take a small seed of a panel of individuals that have a representative behaviors, and then model those audiences up to a scale that meets your campaign requirements. There was a lot of people a lot of companies out there who can do that. We felt that none of them could adequately explain, and because now consumer consent is becoming ever more important to prove as part of meeting regulatory requirements, we felt that the consumer was going to have a significant role in whether that information was correct, could be used for the purposes. And what we're starting to see in Europe now, which has a considerably more progressive regulatory regime, is regulations like the Digital Services Act, where if I place an advertisement in front of you, the obligation is on me to make sure that you understand, give you exactly why who served the ad, how I presented the ad to you, and give you opportunity for recourse to change the fact that you'd seen that ad. And that's difficult enough to do with fully deterministic data. But unless you can trace it back through the model, your PB and here's J, but J didn't exist, P and B did. How am I going to change the source to make sure that you never see a jelly ad again? Very simplistically, we needed to be able to have transparency in both directions through the model for regulatory purposes. So that was our guiding principles, and
Right.
we did pretty well at it.
Yeah, and then it got you into being able to do what if scenarios and doing some counterfactual
Because we'd
interrogations
chosen
of
the
the
right
model. Yeah,
we'd chosen the right path to start with. That was the great thing. If we'd have gone black box model, we'd be forever unpicking it, trying to
right.
understand it. And we started very simplistically. One of the things we did do in the process of this is made some discoveries about just how important it is not to put all the onus for transparency on the model. There are techniques that you can use, including hierarchical taxonomies, that have necessity and sufficiently baked into them, that are causal in their nature, therefore, that allow you to be able to do near lossless. In fact, some would say it is lossless dimensionality reduction. So you can make I put it down to being a bit like origami. If I give you a sheet of paper and ask you to fold it into a crane, unless you've had a few attempts at it, you're not going to get it right. But if I pre-fold it, the
Hmm.
whole lot collapses in on itself much easier to rebuild what I'd pre-folded. And we find that with taxonomies. So one of the things we've learned to do is to meet in the middle, model performance and data performance, and bring them ever closer. And what we've got is we've pushed the boundaries of the levels of dimensionality that we can still retain causality out into areas that are meet the customer requirement. So that's how
Yeah,
we
I mean,
leverage causal.
whatever you're doing, in the details of applying causal AI is definitely working. Like when I wrote the research note about your use case, I mean, 10 times ROI is a pretty big number. In fact, let's bring up that chart.
Well,
And maybe you can talk about what you got out of it so far.
so I want to make sure that I have an opportunity to say what 10x means. What it basically means is that it's unlikely that the deterministic data at hand will be at sufficient scale to meet campaign requirements. And what we're finding is it's a factor of about 10x. That is, we're the audience, the first party audiences that are currently available are generally a tenth of the size that they need to be to effectively to market. And so what we're finding is that, and we're not unique in this, that coming up with an audience of 10 times the seed that you're using to predict is not difficult for anybody to do. But what our customers are coming back to us saying is, well, they're doing exactly what you said. What if? And as soon as they say that, we realize you can't do this with a black box model. You're going to have to start all over again and repredict it, and then hope
Right.
that post hoc you can, using Shapley or something else, which has been proven to have frailty where it needs to be robust, is you're using one model to predict, to explain another, and we're back into that recursive problem of what's different from that than training a model on the output of another. It's just
Yeah.
it leads a spiral down.
What I found cool about it wasn't just to, make this a little bit more abstract. If you were targeting 100 people with an ad, and about 10 of them may be deterministic, they opted in or whatever, but you need another 90 to, to have the full campaign in place. And using a predictive model, it will generate something, but you don't know if you trust it. With the causal stuff, you have a much better trust, lever there to say, I actually trust to go after these 90 additional people. And that what you guys found was the predictive approach, cut the response rate down significantly. But when you use the causal, it was almost as the same as deterministic or the opt-ins, right?
It also means, it also means that we meet some of the industry's requirements for data minimization. Because what
Yeah.
you can actually tell using the causal model is which data didn't contribute to a range of decisions that you want to make, so that you actually don't have to either keep or maintain that data. And you'd have to say at the moment that data minimization is not the first thing on anybody in generative AI. More data, to the point where we've pretty much consumed all that we've got, which is to my point of we're soon. Every time I hear somebody saying that the answer to the problem of no more new data is to synthesize it, I die a little inside. I have to be honest. I just look at that and I go, that's just not going to work. And it's not going to be. You're not going to notice it in the first few iterations. It's going to be too far down the stream. Again, back to mad cow disease. They really didn't know what they were doing until it was just 6 years in and too late for everything. I see that. So yeah, I'm not dystopian, by the way, on the future for this, because
Right.
I actually believe enough smart people will figure it. As I say, Judea Pearl understands it. I agree with you entirely. If you've got a couple of days, go and read that book, and if you've got more than a couple of days, read it twice.
Right. Right. No, it's a great book, and it kind of brings it all to life. Running out of time here, I think, but let me just show you. I want to show you just one last chart, because you're on the leading edge. You're a pioneer. This is some of the research that we did on enterprises and their use of different types of AI and AI
Yeah.
models. And you can see the reasoning, at best, between 10 and 20%, depending on what type, but the causal was around 12%. So there certainly are a ton of businesses that are using it, and that. I mean, I'm aware of hundreds of businesses that are using causal AI in one notion or another, but that's a very small number. I would expect that all to grow as time goes by here, but you're certainly on the leading edge here.
So I would say that we specialize in two of those. The domain LLMs, I'll call those our hybrid RAG. That's where you're using embeddings, but you're also putting in a knowledge graph into it. We do a lot in that space, and obviously Causal AI, the reason why we're here today. But I would say that what you've shown is a snapshot. What I'd love to see is the trajectory that each of those is on, because
Yep.
just even if you put the Gartner hype cycle on those, they don't all. Then they're not all at the same stage of their evolution, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, I plan on tracking this going forward. So this was 2024 data, the best that we were able to, determine it through a bunch of different studies and reports. and we'll track it forward. And with the good news here,
Yeah.
if I was to bring up one final chart here before we wrap up, which is the marketplace is projected to grow 41% compounded over the next 5 years or so to almost $1 billion market expansion for AI. I think it's actually going to be higher than that in the end. But if you look at all the vendors out there, both domain-specific ones, like say for life sciences or for supply chain, or more general purpose, like how so would fit in that. These vendors are democratizing the use of causal AI for the masses, right? And it's just going to get easier and easier, and more people are going to be able to deal with this very complex subject as time goes by here. And I think you don't have to be an elite AI engineer to use causal AI anymore. It's really becoming much easier because of the tools and the agents that help you build this stuff. So I'm encouraged that we're going to see it ramp up into the future here.
Yeah, I'd love to get the CTO of each of those companies in the same room on the common theme.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Mark.
Yeah.
Well, look, thanks so much for joining us today. Really great insights, and it was great to, first meet you not too long ago and really understand what you're doing in more detail. It's really fascinating, and you're definitely a leader in the space, right? Keeps up to date on your progress.
On the shoulders of giants, sir. On the shoulders of giants.
There you go. All right, and also let me just add a big thank you to Brendan Ryder for producing another great show here today. And for all of you, thank you, as always, for joining us on the Next Frontiers of AI podcast, hosted by SiliconANGLE and theCUBE Research. I so appreciate you tuning in. Contact me or Mark on LinkedIn if we can be of any help on your journey to agentic AI. And don't forget to visit thecuberesearch.com and siliconangle.com to stay up to date on all the latest research and podcasts from across our team. We are the leader in tech news and analysis. Bye for now.